Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht. Komm dir entgegen.
Hello and welcome to Gegenpressing, the Bundesliga podcast. This is the preview show. I'm Manu and he's Stefan Bayankowski. And Stefan, before we do anything else, because I forget every single week, we're doing this in association with Get German Football News, who are super nice and post this podcast on their site every week. And just want to point out that they're really worth checking out. So got that in first. And your job is, of course, now to point out the fantasy football stuff. We're both terrible at it. I think this is a well-established fact, but some people are really, really good. And I think we're seeing a little bit of a lead at the very top of the Gegenpressing Liga.
Yeah, we are. Kuro SH is still top. I think he was top last week. FC Clever Puns is second, Destroy third, 50 plus 1 fourth. Definitely noticing 50 plus 1 and Kuro SH most weeks. I think the two of them are kind of the guys going head to head. And some, as always, just some great puns and some great names. I like the fourth place last week for total match points was someone whose name was Rosa Did Nothing Wrong, which is always quite funny. Farmers Pride in 7th place, of course, played on the Farmers League. FC Hershey, which I wonder if that's Christian Pulisich's dad. And Pizza by Pizarro. There's all sorts of, there's some great ones in there, which is half the fun of fantasy football. And it, of course, distracts from our truly, truly dreadful performances in the league. So long may they continue.
Hey, you know what? If you have any fantasy football tips, put them in the comments, please, because clearly I need them.
Yeah, if you can CC me into that email as well, that'd be helpful.
Yeah. Just put them in the comments, either like on the Substack or on whichever social media platform you use these days, and let us know what's the secret, because I need to know. I just need to know. I just don't get it. Anyways, Stefan, we have a lot of matches to discuss. An exciting match day coming up before the international break, of course. So let's jump into it right after this break. This episode of the Gegenpressing podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. Football is back, and BetOnline is your number one information source for all your sports wagering info with all the up-to-minute stats, news, scores, and match-up breakdowns. Get the latest game odds, spreads, and totals from the NFL and college football at your fingertips with BetOnline's real-time updates on statistics, news, and odds. From week 1 all the way to college football playoff and Super Bowl, BetOnline gives you the access to the best football promotion and contests available anywhere online. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, BELIEVE, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. So remember the last time I did this ad read and like someone mentioned to me I should go down to Washington and do one of those like college football games? Well, I can tell this listener I'm going to the Apple Bowl in November, which is I think at American Thanksgiving. It's the last Apple Bowl because they're dissolving this division. If you want to find out more about this, you will not learn it on this podcast because it's way too complicated. But anyways, I'm going to UW against Washington State, and I'm looking forward to it.
None of that made any sense to me. I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm sure plenty of our listeners are delighted to hear it.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm looking forward to my first ever college American football game. I heard that they also sell booze there, which is great, which should make it easier because Seattle is cold and wet that time of the year. And that stadium has no roof. So there's that. Anyway, Stefan, enough of that. That's the wrong sport. We're not here to, we're not the Pac-12 or whatever that conference is called preview show. We're the Bundesliga preview show. Games start on Friday. Is it time again to make fun of the Friday fixture? Are we back to that yet? With Gladbach against Mainz?
I'm not quite sure, because I think you could make the argument that this is actually a relegation 6-pointer, the way these two teams are playing right now. I personally think Gladbach are going to probably nick this one. The result last weekend suggests that they've maybe turned a corner of sorts. They beat a Bochum side in Bochum and scored all 3 goals before half-time. Makes me wonder if, things are finally beginning to kind of click into gear for Gerardo Siona's side. At least far more so than mine, who are just sinking like a stone right now. In fact, I'm beginning to wonder when the questions will begin to ask of Bo Svensson. Maybe they already have. I just haven't noticed them this week. But I predict that Gladbach will win this game 2-0 and might finally get going this season, because I think this start to the season's like one of their worst starts in maybe like 15 or 20 years, if I'm not mistaken. So they really do have to start putting points on the board.
Yeah, I went for a similar result. I went for a narrow 2-1 win. I think the Bochum game is an indication that things are going to get better. Still not entirely convinced, but I'm really not convinced by Mainz. They are one of 2 teams I'm really worried about. Actually, there's 3. And neither one of them are the promoted sides. So we'll get to them later this show. But yeah, I'm starting to get a little bit worried about Mainz. So I think that Gladbach are going to get all 3 points here. All right. That gets us to my match of the week, which is Dortmund against Union Berlin. I alluded to it in the Champions League Roundup show. I think we need to start getting a little worried about Union Berlin here, Stefan. I think this is going to be... I don't have it at hand, but I think this is the longest losing streak that they have had since being promoted to the Bundesliga. It's definitely across all competition, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's not going to end here. I think that Dortmund are going to win this game 3-1. I think that things, especially on the road, things have been a bit more difficult. And I just think that Dortmund have had this ability as of late to score decisive goals against teams that hunker down. They somehow, whether it's Marco Reus or Niklas Füllkrug, they just seem to be getting the job done at home, and that makes you wonder what's going to go on and happen next to Union Berlin, because I think that result, especially going into the international break, right? Maybe actually that is maybe the one positive, that Urs Fischer will have 2 weeks to work for this team in quiet, although I guess a lot of players are going away on international duty. But I'm starting to worry about Union Berlin, and I think Dortmund are going to relish the fact that they can play them and probably beat them at this stage.
Yeah. That's an interesting take. I must admit, I've kind of been a little more positive for Union, to be honest with you. I actually wrote in the Monday Bulletin, which is our now a free Monday newsletter, which we put out, which is kind of some brief talking points from the weekend's football, that I basically said things are going to get worse before they get better for Union, referencing this game, the Champions League clash against Braga, and they've also got a very tough game when they get back from the international break, I think. But the point really was that, as bad as Union's performance or the results have been, I don't think their performances really justify those results. I thought the midweek clash against Braga was a perfect example of that, where, they were probably the better team, and then they conceded 2 basically wonder goals from Braga. Similarly, Heidenheim really dug in, and all due respect to them, they did what they had to do, but Union had the lion's share of ball and chances and should have scored a number of goals. only for Heidenheim to score an outstanding free kick. So, if I was an Union Berlin fan right now, I'd probably be cursing the gods, thinking that the club were cursed because they keep conceding these worldy goals. If this was Football Manager, I would have quit long ago thinking, right, this is just so unrealistic. These teams keep scoring ridiculous goals against me. But one of the things that really stood out for me, actually, after that Heidenheim game was that, for example, Union are creating chances in games. They had an XG of 2.95 against Heidenheim. They had an XG of like 2.5, I think, against Braga. And one thing that really stood out to me was that, and this was in the Monday Bulletin, was that Stuttgart and Leverkusen are averaging just 1.5 and 2.5 more shots per game than Union, but have scored 10 and 11 more goals so far this season. So, Christopher Trammell said after the Heidenheim game that, it feels like they're just kind of lacking confidence. And that certainly seems to be the case up front. And that kind of maybe has to change. Maybe that has to an extent, because I thought Gerardo Becker was outstanding against Braga. But anyway, it's a long way to basically saying I think they might be a bit of a handful for Dortmund this weekend. I think they'll probably relish being able to just kind of sit in deep, let Dortmund throw everything at them, and then they can kind of hit on the break. So I've actually gone for a very narrow 2-1 win for Dortmund, and I was very close to actually going for a draw for this game, just because Dortmund haven't been encouraging or comprehensive at all this season. And I don't know, I just feel like Union are due a bit of luck and good fortune, and it might come in the Westfalenstadion.
Yeah, I think Marco Reus and Niklas Füllkrug will once again somehow rescue it for Dortmund. Intriguing match, definitely worth tuning in on for the Saturday fixtures. Okay, so up next, Leipzig against Bochum. What do you think here, Stefan?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty straightforward result, to be honest with you. I've gone for a 2-0 win for Leipzig. I think you could maybe argue that there's that kind of Bayern curse that whoever plays well against them tends to drop points. But, as we talked about in the midweek show, the Champions League reaction show, Leipzig actually gave a decent account themselves against Man City. They did more than enough against Bayern to potentially win the game. And I think lowly Bochum are probably going to struggle in Saxony.
Yeah, I almost wanted to go for a big score here. I think that Leipzig are going to easily win it, especially at home. But rather going for something like 5 or 6-0 or 4-0 even, I just went for a 3-0 win, which I'm probably going to regret because I think Leipzig are going to score a lot of goals here, Stefan.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. I mean, there's potential for them to be a little tired and jaded after 2 really big games, but if any team was going to take advantage of that, I don't really think it'll be Bochum.
Also, Leipzig have 3 squads. That's true. 2.5. But you know what I mean, right? There's so much depth. I think they'll be just fine. So, yeah. 3-0 is my prediction, and it could be more. All right, so up next, Augsburg against Darmstadt. I've been pretty impressed by both the promoted teams lately, Stefan, and I actually went for a very narrow Darmstadt victory here, 2-1.
Well, wouldn't it be typical of Manu to downplay Augsburg on this show? I've I've gone for a 1-1 draw in this game, just because I haven't been particularly impressed with Augsburg, to be honest, but nor have I been really impressed with Darmstadt either. The only thing that I think really separates these teams, or maybe would put it in favour for Augsburg, is that they still have that kind of decent home form. Their home form in 2023 is really impressive. It's probably what kept them up last season. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they're still undefeated. Yeah, they've one win and 2 draws so far at home this season.
Okay, at home.
Yes, yeah. At home. Yeah, at home. Yeah. So I've gone for a 1-1 draw here. I was tempted to go for an Augsburg win, but yeah, I think it's going to be a 1-1 draw and perhaps one for the purists.
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. That's not the match to maybe tune into. This next one could be though, Stefan. I think that's your match of the week. Stuttgart against Wolfsburg.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, I just kind of feel like this is probably the most entertaining attacking match of the match day. Two teams who have really impressed actually so far this season. Stuttgart, we've talked all about. We've done podcasts, we've done newsletters, and I think most people kind of know why Stuttgart have done well this season, why they continue to score goals. We had Matt Ford kind of writing for the Monday Bulletin explaining, how Cologne did all they could to really kind of stop Guirassy from, kind of rumbling on with his incredible start to the season. But Stuttgart still managed to find a way, some other way. And, I wouldn't say Wolfsburg have really kind of captured the attention to the same extent, but I think they're maybe even flying under the radar, because I saw a stat when I was kind of doing my previous, kind of pulling together my previous stats for this, and it's really quite interesting. If Wolfsburg were to win this game and pick up 15 points from their opening 7 games, they would be it'd only be the second time this century that they've managed to pick up that many points at this point in the season. And the only time they've picked up more points at this point in the season was in 2004, 2005. So, they're not quite as good at home, not quite as good on the road, which is the only thing that's kind of made me kind of lean this more towards Stuttgart. But I still think it's going to be a really fun, entertaining, attacking match. So I've gone for a 3-2 win for Stuttgart.
This episode of the Gegenpressing podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. Football is back, and BetOnline is your number one information source for all your sports wagering info with all the up-to-minute stats, news, scores, and match-up breakdowns. Get the latest game odds, spreads, and totals from the NFL and college football at your fingertips with BetOnline's real-time updates on statistics, news, and odds. From week 1 all the way to college football playoff and Super Bowl, BetOnline gives you the access to the best football promotion and contests available anywhere online. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, BELIEVE, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. 3-2 win, okay, so you're expecting 5 goals. I also went for Stuttgart win, but 2-1. And I cannot stress this enough. If you have Guirassy in your fantasy team, this is the time to sell him and sign and bring in Undav, because he was the guy who scored the last 2 goals for Stuttgart. I do think that Stuttgart, I think that's the thing that we kind of pointed out about them, right? That everyone paid so much attention to Guirassy, forgetting that you could probably put another center forward there and they would maybe not be quite as productive, but very productive too. And I think that is just the beauty of this Hoeneß system, that he's really managed to put together a team that's playing that has a tactical identity, and that the different players that are playing in the system have the ability to really show that every single match day. So I think that's going to be fascinating, because I think the guy in the other dugout is quite similar, Kovac, right? Slowly but surely he's forming a team here that you can tell this is a Kovac team, which is interesting as well. So yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to this game. For some reason or not, this is actually not the designated Topspiel, Stefan. That is going to Werder Bremen against Hoffenheim. Although I think you wrote something really interesting about Hoffenheim, which actually got featured in the DFL newsletter. Congrats. On the Substack. That's always really nice when the DFL does this and shares one of our newsletters. Hoffenheim have been a very intriguing side, and Werder Bremen is one of the other big teams by fan base, of course, right? That I'm really worried about this year. And I think that Hoffenheim are going to win this game, Stefan, 2-0.
Yeah, I've actually gone for the exact same result. I completely agree with you. I think I kind of said maybe on last week's preview show that, that clash against Darmstadt last weekend was probably one that Bremen really had to win if they really kind of wanted to kind of turn around this kind of really tricky start to the season. They didn't. They got thrashed by Darmstadt, and it really feels like Bremen are kind of they're struggling. You could make the argument that, they've still kind of got a decent enough home form to fall back on. They lost to Bayern at the start of the season, but they beat Mainz and Cologne after that. So they've got 2 wins from 3 at home. Of course, those 2 teams are probably 2 of the most out of form in the Bundesliga this season, so maybe take that with a pinch of salt. But I think suffice to say that not hugely impressed with Werder Bremen right now. And I feel like Hoffenheim, have got a lot about them. I think we talked about on the main show that, people will probably look at that 3-1 defeat to Dortmund and think, right, that's the bubble burst. They're going to stumble back down to mid-table, and they were rubbish because, Dortmund scored 3 goals.
But they weren't rubbish, they were excellent.
No,
right?
Yeah, that was the point I was coming to. They're not. They were quite good. I thought they went toe-to-toe with Dortmund for the most part. Obviously, Ryerson scored a truly ridiculous goal late in injury time. And yeah, Hoffenheim definitely do have their defensive issues, there's no doubt about it, as Seb talked about on the show. But I think they've got more than enough firepower to kind of distinguish them from most of the teams in the mid-table. So, yeah, I think they probably should pick up a pretty comfortable win here.
Pellegrino is such a good coach, honestly. I think he was a really good coach at Stuttgart too. It's just sometimes, it just doesn't fit. And here's another coach, I think, that's really putting his fingerprints on our team. And, this seems like just a good fit. And I think this Hoffenheim side will surprise a few people this year. So keep watching them, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Cool. Anyways, Leverkusen against Köln. This is actually a game that everyone should be watching, Stefan. This is the Rhein Derby, but only, of course, if Köln win it. But will Köln win it? What's your thoughts?
No, I don't think they'll win it, so it will not be a Rhein Derby. I've gone for a 3-0 win for Leverkusen here, much like the Leipzig result. I didn't spend too much time worrying about this one. Cologne are such an interesting team. I was talking to Matt Ford about this last weekend when he was at the game, and we were discussing the manner in which they do seem to start games quite well, but then they just seem to unravel. I don't know if it's a case of, fitness or training, or maybe they just don't have the firepower to take advantage of opportunities when they, when they have possession at the start of games. But I watched them against Werder Bremen. He watched them against Stuttgart, and it was kind of similar situations where they start well and then they just kind of lose their grip of the game. And yeah, I think Leverkusen will just have way too much firepower for them.
So this is the third big team I'm worried about, is Köln. And I went for the exact same result as you did for a 3-0 Leverkusen win. But I'm starting to worry about Köln. I think this whole transfer bans, the saga, is hovering over the club. It makes them really difficult to plan for the future. I think they just lack depth. They Kicker ran a poll this week asking readers whether Köln is going to get relegated. So you just know, when those polls come out, that things are not good. So that's my trifecta of big teams I'm worried about. It's maybe in that order: Köln first, Bremen second, and what was the third one that was mentioned? No, it was not Frankfurt. Oh, it was Mainz. But I guess they're not that big of a team. But they're one of those teams that I'm also... Those 3 are the ones where I'm saying they could maybe rescue one of the promoted teams from relegation by going surprise down. So those are the 3 teams that I'm a little bit worried about. Anyways, that gets us to it's 3 games on Sunday because of the European games, right? So Bayern against Freiburg. I think this is actually going to be a really interesting game because I think Christian Streich will take a look at that Copenhagen game and say, look, we can do that too. We can do the exact same thing to them. But unfortunately, I think Bayern will have just enough to win this game. But I went for a very narrow 2-1 win here.
Yeah, I've actually got the exact same result. And it will all depend really on kind of how good Freiburg are on the day. They've obviously had a bit of a stumble in form recently, but I think the context is kind of key to this. You know, they lost to a very good Stuttgart side who perhaps surprised them with a 5-0 win. They then lost a hard-fought match against Dortmund 4-2. They were held to a 0-0 draw against Frankfurt, who, you know, actually do have one of the best defensive records in the league so far this season. And then they kind of were able to bounce back against Salzburg last weekend. So I don't think Freiburg are at their very best right now by any means. But I also don't think they're maybe as poor as some people would be suggesting. I guess it kind of depends how well Bayern play at the Allianz Arena. We talked a lot about their performance against Copenhagen on the midweek show. I think a lot of Bayern fans are still far from convinced of Tuchel and his tactics, but I think on the whole they probably should have enough to beat Freiburg, so that's why I've gone for a narrow win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're in agreement here. All right, that's the final match of the week is then Frankfurt against Heidenheim. What do you think here?
So I've gone for a 0-0 draw.
No goals.
So maybe worth just kind of concluding the match day a little earlier. Go have a cup of tea. Go read that book you've been putting off for a while, because I just think I watched Frankfurt's game last weekend and they were pretty hapless against Wolfsburg. It feels like they're kind of going through the motions, and if they had better players, they would maybe be able to kind of pick up more points than they have, but they simply haven't. And, I think that was all summed up by Mario Götze, who's the most kind of slight and unphysical player in the Bundesliga, against sent off for 2 clumsy tackles. The second of which was just him desperately trying to defend a counter-attack, which is just obviously not what he's supposed to be doing on the pitch. But I think what's most important is that even though Frankfurt have a decent defensive record of only conceding 5 goals in 4 games, which is the best in the league, by the way, 5 goals in 6 games, so far, they've also only scored 4. And I think that's the crucial issue. And when they come up against a team like Heidenheim, who have done well and have battled well, but also haven't scored a huge amount of goals, this kind of feels like a game where both these teams might cancel each other out.
So these two teams have only met once before in history, and that was during the 2017-2018 German Cup. The cup that Frankfurt would actually end up winning, right? Against Bayern, and the result was a 2-1 win for Frankfurt in extra time. I think this time Frankfurt are going to win it again in 2-1, but obviously not in extra time. But I think this is going to be another one of those. I feel like Frankfurt under Top Müller, they're just working themselves into the season. I've said this before. I think they're essentially just waiting for Christmas to sign a new striker, and until then, it's just going to be match day to match day, laboring themselves from one result to another. But you know what? I still do think that they have enough to beat this Heidenheim side, although it will be narrowly 2-1. I will not be watching this game, though, because I will be on a flight to Montreal. That is the game that I'm missing, that match day, which tells you how high my priority down my priority list this particular game was, because I'm not missing any of the other games.
Yeah, I think I might miss this one as well, to be honest, but I'm also travelling this weekend, so we'll see what happens. But I'm sure we'll catch up. I'm sure we'll have someone watching it. And of course, like I said, for anyone who isn't aware, doesn't follow us on the Substack, we do have now a free newsletter that goes out every Monday morning from all of our kind of contributors. Not all, but from our contributors and writers, including myself and Manu. So do sign up for that if you're interested.
And it's free, which is great. Not a lot of things are free anymore. Want to point out this podcast is brought to you in association with Get German Football News and sponsored by Bet Online. Also, next week, keep in mind it is an international break, which means no preview show. We'll still put out some content, of course, just not the preview show. And then, of course, I'm not sure what we're going to do the week after, right? We always kind of play it by ear. Maybe some club will fire a coach, and then we can do a special or something like that. But just trying to bring awareness that schedule might be a little bit different because of the international break. Enjoyed it last match day before the international break. It's 2 weeks off with club football. You know, every time you kind of get into it, Stefan, it's kind of like, oh yeah, here's the national teams.
Yeah, exactly. I hate it. I hate it. And I could do a whole podcast on my issues with international football and how it's crammed into the calendar. And I saw people discussing how the next World Cup in North America might also have to be played halfway through the season because it's also just as hot as Qatar in parts of America. So even better. But yeah, a discussion for another day.
I think that'd be fine because unlike Qatar, they actually have climatized stadiums.
Yeah, but it wasn't really that. Wasn't the issue. The issue was that it was played in the middle of the league season, which is what my main issue with it was. Well, that wasn't my only issue with it being there, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I mean, like, I think the World Cup here will be fine because, like, most of the stadiums are either in a climate zone that's not too hot, but it's a good question. Anyways, like, we shouldn't delve on this. We can deal with that when the time comes. And until then, I'll say auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.